A grain of defiance. The Valnari Empire had ruled the outer systems for over 500 years, and in that time they had never known fear. With their silver-armored fleets blotting out stars and their rigid doctrine of absolute obedience, they swept through lesser civilizations with all the cruelty of a cosmic plague. Their creed was simple: submit or be erased. They didn't negotiate, they didn't forgive, and above all, they didn't consider backwater worlds like Earth worth noticing. To them, humanity wasn't even a classification. Not a threat, not a curiosity, just another noise in the vast, galactic, static, tribal, emotional primitive. The kind of species that burned forests to plant cities and fought wars over colored flags. Earth wasn't on their star charts. And if it was, it would have been labeled irrelevant. That changed the day a Terran mining probe drifted too far into contested Valnari space. The probe was automated, unarmed, nothing but a deep-range sensor array and a single beacon logging mineral data. It wasn't meant as a provocation, it was just a machine doing its job. But the Valnari didn't tolerate trespasses, intentional or otherwise. Within 26 minutes of detection, a Valnari interceptor vaporized the probe with a fusion lance. No warning, no communication, just an efficient lethal response, standard operating procedure. They expected nothing more to come of it. They were wrong. 6 hours later, a transmission arrived, blunt, unencrypted, and very, very human. "We're coming to get our stuff. Try and stop us." The message echoed through the war chambers of the Valnari High Fleet. At first, officers laughed sharp, clicking bursts of amusement bouncing between crystalline walls, but then silence fell. Attached to the message was a single image. Grainy, poor resolution, likely sent by accident or maybe not. It showed Earth's fleet, not elegant, not refined, not like the Valnari cruisers with their glowing hulls and geometric symmetry. No, this was something else entirely, something ugly. Dark metal slabs floating in void, covered in armor plates, scorched black. No curvature, no flare, just pure brutal function. Weapons covered every inch. Rail cannons, torpedo tubes, plasma drills, retrofitted into broadside cannons. Engines that didn't glide, they howled. The Valnari had seen warships from 1,000 species. None looked like this. Admiral Cirque narrowed his compound eyes as the image lingered on his screen. He didn't blink, didn't speak, just stared. Finally, one of his junior tacticians whispered, "What is that design?" Cirque didn't look away. His voice came low and hard. "Not design instinct," because that's what those ships felt like. Not built in labs, not forged by pride, they were forged by pain, by the desperate need of a species that had crawled through centuries of chaos and still wasn't done bleeding. These weren't ceremonial fleets. These weren't meant to intimidate or impress. These ships were made to end things. The Valnari officers shifted uncomfortably. There was something primal about the still image, something that made even the most hardened among them feel cold. This wasn't strategy, this wasn't arrogance, it was survival turned weapon. And then the second part of the message arrived, a single-line transmission bouncing across subspace, routed through half-dead satellites and patched in broken binary. "Bring our dead home, or we'll come and take them back, piece by piece." Admiral Cirque leaned back in his chair and exhaled through clenched mandibles. For the first time in a century, he felt something he didn't recognize. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't anger. It was dread. Not because of Earth's technology, not because of their tactics, but because of what he saw in the image. A fleet not built for conquest. A fleet built by survivors. And survivors don't stop. They finished. The shape of war. The first Valnari patrol to engage Earth's fleet vanished within 7 minutes. Their transmissions cut out mid-battle cry, replaced by garbled static and the shriek of ruptured hulls. No distress signal, no black box recovery, just silence. The second patrol lasted longer, 9 minutes, but only because they tried to retreat. They didn't make it far. The Terrans didn't chase them with precision strikes or elegant maneuvers. They swarmed. Human destroyers plowed through asteroid belts like bulls through glass. They didn't dodge, they didn't dance, they collided. By the third engagement, Valnari tacticians were no longer laughing. And they finally saw it, the names. Each Terran vessel bore a designation not of legacy or glory, but of wrath. SCS Retribution. SCS Blood Price. 6. Forgive us. Not names of warships, names of sins etched in steel. These weren't vessels of empire. They were final confessions. Valnari analysts scoured combat footage hoping to understand Earth's doctrine, but they found no doctrine, only brutality. A human dreadnought had reportedly rammed a Valnari capital ship, splitting it in half and triggering a chain reaction of plasma core detonations. No one on the human side survived the impact. And yet Earth called it a success. That's when the Volnari began to understand this wasn't just a war. This was something else, something more dangerous. They were not fighting a conventional military force. They were fighting madness wrapped in metal. Human formations didn't hold tight lines. They didn't maintain elegant vectors. Instead, they split, diverged, enveloped like predators at sea. Their destroyers operated in triads. One drawing fire, one going dark, one charging. Their heavy cruisers often deployed mines not to block retreat, but to cut off mercy. When Valnari Command reviewed intercepted comms between human captains, they expected bravado or tactical analysis. Instead, they found chilling simplicity. We got one of theirs. Not enough saved the last torpedo for their command ship. I want them to watch. The Valnari High Command ordered tactical retreats, pulling forces from outlying sectors to form a defensive crescent. But Earth didn't follow predictable attack paths. Their fleets split like viruses, seeding chaos in 6 systems simultaneously. Outposts blinked offline like candles in a windstorm. And all the while, no speeches, no gloating, only destruction. One Valnari commander tried to open comms during a particularly savage ambush. "This is a misunderstanding, Earth, stand down. We demand a ceasefire." The response came minutes later. Not a video, not an audio feed. Just a single voice on an open frequency. Raspy, calm, cold. "No misunderstanding, you took one of ours. Now we take everything." That frequency played across hundreds of ships. Some Volnari crews heard it seconds before their bridge turned into shrapnel. Some died still repeating it as if trying to understand the sheer certainty in those 5 words. It wasn't arrogance, it wasn't rage. It was purpose. And purpose, the Volnari were learning, was far more terrifying than hatred, because hatred burns out. But purpose endures, it digs in, it plans, it remembers. Reports began surfacing of Earth's AI drones being used as suicide bombers, targeting shield reactors with pinpoint accuracy often too fast for Volnari sensors to register before impact. More disturbingly, it was confirmed that some human ships, after taking crippling damage, did not request rescue. They just changed course and went straight for the enemy. Volnari protocol dictated preservation of resources, the extraction of wounded. But Earth's ships had their own rules. If we can't go home, we take someone with us. No one on the Volnari side could understand such tactics. The logic didn't compute. Until one analyst put it simply. They don't fear death. They've made friends with it. The High Command called for an emergency war council. Admiral Cirque, gaunt and sleepless, stood before the holographic war table, his clawed hand trembling as he tapped a blinking icon. Yet another fleet gone dark. No more underestimation, no more sneering. He turned to the gathered ministers, voice brittle with realization. "We made a mistake. They're not here to win. They're here to bleed us." And still, Earth kept coming. The silence between worlds. There had always been a cold arrogance in the way the Valnari conducted war. They saw conflict as art, strategic movements, elegant formations, precise strikes. They prided themselves on outmaneuvering enemies before they had time to react. But Earth changed everything. Earth turned war into a funeral march. They didn't target fleets. They targeted supply chains. They didn't cripple colonies. They erased them. They didn't conquer planets. They made them unlivable. It started with Orbital Farm's essential infrastructure for dozens of Outer Rim worlds. The Terrans bypassed Valnari military outposts and detonated plasma torpedoes into every one of those platforms. The atmosphere itself ignited raining fire over agricultural domes. Next came energy, silos, fusion vaults, the size of small cities. Earth didn't sabotage them. They imploded them, leaving behind neutron ash fields where nothing could grow for centuries. And when Valnari forces tried to regroup at Fortress Worlds, Earth simply ignored them. Because the Terrans weren't chasing military victory, they were chasing shame. Slave colonies on Threx 9, once hidden deep beneath frozen crusts, were among the first civilian centers struck. The Valnari assumed Earth would liberate them, make a show of compassion. Instead, Earth's fleet leveled the entire moon. No prisoners, no speeches, just a live broadcast of the explosions sent across all known frequencies. A chilling caption scrolled across the bottom of the feed. "This is what we do to places where your chains touched ours." Admiral Cirque could barely recognize his own map anymore. Sectors that once bloomed with Valnari commerce now flickered red with warning beacons and debris fields. Entire star routes were considered no-fly zones, not because Earth controlled them, but because Earth had broken them. Civilians fled toward the core worlds in waves, clogging orbital ports and screaming for ships that never came. Trade networks collapsed, supply lines dried up, Pirate factions emerged in the void, but even they avoided Terran territory. The war wasn't just going badly. It was unraveling everything. Cirque watched as the war room devolved into panicked murmurs. For every planet the Valnari retreated from Earth didn't claim it, they just left it burning. One of Cirque's aides, eyes wide with disbelief, whispered what many were thinking. This isn't war, it's a message. Cirque didn't disagree, because deep in his bones he'd realized something no one else wanted to say aloud. This wasn't about revenge. This was a reckoning. Still, the Council insisted Earth could be reasoned with. Envoys were dispatched, small ships bearing white pulse lights and encrypted peace offers. None returned. Then came the day Earth's main fleet entered Valnari core space. 1,000 ships strong, every hull black as ash. Each vessel armed to the teeth, arranged not in ceremonial columns, but in a formation so wide, so all-consuming, it looked like a crescent of nightfall sweeping across the stars. At the vanguard of this monstrous fleet was a vessel no one dared name without a tremor. SCS Ashes of Terror. She was legend, now blackened and broken from past wars. Her surface a patchwork of fused armor. Salvaged wreckage and old scars never buffed out. Some of those scars, they said, were left there deliberately. Each one a memorial to a dead crew, a lost colony, a forgotten scream. The ship hovered like a beast held back by chains. And then it spoke. A transmission crackled across every Valnari channel, overriding even internal fleet comms. No encryption, no ceremony, just a single image. A woman, her face lit by fire, a faded scar running from brow to cheek. Her uniform was torn, blood dried on one sleeve, her eyes sharp, deadly tired. You came for minerals, she said. You left us corpses. She didn't blink. Now we give you graves. Then the feed cut. Moments later, the Ashes of Terror fired its primary weapon. A rail cannon slug the size of a passenger shuttle. It streaked through vacuum like a silent god slammed into the Valnari's crown. Orbital station and split it open like an egg. That station had stood for 2 centuries. It was meant to be impenetrable. It shattered in 4 seconds. No countdown, no battle cry, just death. The rest of the Terran fleet surged forward behind the first blast. Still silent, still focused, no honor. Salutes or formations, only slaughter. They hit hard and fast, rolling through defenses like fire through brittle leaves. Valnari ships danced and spiraled, graceful as ever. But grace was useless against rage. For every sleek cruiser, 3 Terran warships rammed, detonated, or swarmed. There was no escape, no symmetry, just a bludgeoning, relentless tide. In desperation, Valnari Command sent out a final broadcast. Hold the line, swarm tactics, do not engage directly. But Earth didn't care about strategy. They denied options. From within the storm flew the SCS Hell's Memory, releasing a cloud of black drones, each one shaped not like a bird of prey, but a needle. They didn't fire. They collided. They didn't track. They latched on. They didn't aim. They tore. And somewhere in the middle of that chaos, a Valnari commander screamed into comms, "Ceasefire, this is a misunderstanding." Static. Then that voice returned. No misunderstanding. Pause. Now we take everything. Ashes of Terror. The skies above Jarth had never known invasion. For millennia, the Valnari capital had been protected by a defensive network of stations, anti-orbital batteries, and pulse barriers that pulsed like golden veins in the upper stratosphere. The planet itself was a monument to their supremacy. Crystal spires that sang with resonance, floating, gravity gardens that shimmered across cityscapes, and the legendary citadel of command rising like a sun-forged obelisk at the planet's heart. To the Valnari, Jarth was untouchable. Until now, the sky darkened not from storm clouds, but from the shadow of Earth's fleet. 1,000 black silhouettes eclipsed the light, and leading them like a herald of judgment came the Ashes of Terror. No longer just a name, it was a prophecy in motion. Its hull was scorched, pockmarked with the scars of 100 battles. Plates from enemy ships were fused into its sides like bones and armor. It drifted slowly over the capital, its engines burning a dull crimson, like breath held too long. Inside the Grand Council chamber, chaos reigned. Ministers shrieked. Military aides shouted across overlapping tactical maps. Civilian reports screamed of traffic blockades, riots at evacuation points in overloaded sky rails. Yet even amid the panic, Admiral Cirque stood still. He had not slept in days. His uniform was unfastened at the collar, his hands shaking behind his back. But his eyes, those red multifaceted lenses, stayed locked on the main holomap. Sector after sector blinked red. Fleet Alpha had not responded in hours. Every defense system around Jarth was lit up and useless. Because this wasn't a siege, it was a funeral. Cirque didn't need to say it. His silence said enough. And then the Terran transmission broke through every channel on the planet. Not just military frequencies, but civilian feeds, corporate ads, emergency beacons, even personal communication implants. The override was total. There she was again, Captain Mara Voss. No theatrics, no backdrop of banners or insignias. Just firelit steel behind her. And her voice. You thought we'd beg. Her eyes bored into the lens like they could reach through the screen and tear out a conscience. You thought we'd kneel like the rest. You thought killing miners meant silencing a problem. She turned slightly, revealing a wall of names etched into the black metal behind her, thousands of them. Workers, children, civilians, not soldiers, people. We didn't come for land. We didn't come for vengeance. She stepped closer, and for a moment the room went still. We came to bury the ones who took them. Then her gaze sharpened to a blade's edge. Fire. From Orbit 7, tungsten rods the size of skyscrapers dropped in absolute silence. No propulsion, no heat signatures, just the weight of gravity and velocity. And when they hit, the citadel of command disintegrated. There was no explosion, no theatrical ball of fire, just obliteration. The rods punched straight through the spire, the streets beneath it, and into the tectonic crust below. The entire central district folded inward, buildings imploding as shock waves rippled for miles. Sonic booms cracked the sky. The glow of destruction lit the upper atmosphere. What had once been the heart of Valnari rule was now a crater. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what came after. Nothing. No speech. No demand. Just silence. Cirque didn't die that day. He had evacuated hours before, not out of cowardice, but clarity. He had known this moment was coming, known the moment Earth sent its first message, the moment he saw the shape of their fleet. From a deep subterranean bunker far from the capital, he stood now watching the fires through a reinforced viewport. Ash plumed into the atmosphere like black snow. The gravity gardens had collapsed into molten glass. The skyline, once a tapestry of light, now smoldered. An aide beside him whispered, "Is this victory to them genocide?" Cirque answered without looking, "This isn't genocide." He exhaled, slowly, bitter. "It's a lesson and we're the example." He was right, because Earth wasn't here to rule. They were here to make sure no one ever tried this again. Across the galaxy, silence rippled through communication arrays. On distant planets, dignitaries and warlords stared at their monitors in disbelief. Some assumed it was propaganda. Others thought it was a simulation. But as orbital sensors confirmed the blast signatures in real time, there was no longer any doubt. Earth hadn't won a war. They had made a statement, and it was burned into the bones of a dead empire. Who's next to try? The Valnari capital lay in ruins. Its towers collapsed into blackened slag, its skylines torn by orbital scars. Across the galaxy, the images spread like a virus ash drifting over a once proud civilization. The crater where the High Command had stood, the expressionless face of Captain Mara Voss just before she gave the order. And Earth said nothing. No ultimatums, no conditions, no invasion. Just silence, and then 4 words appeared across every Galactic Union communication relay, burned into the bandwidth like a scar. Who's next to try? No follow-up, no context, but the message didn't need one. The galaxy understood. The Trelawney Empire, whose warships had once flanked Valnari conquests, immediately declared neutrality and rerouted all expansion fleets back to home territory. The Draw Confederates, once loud in their condemnation of primitive Earth aggression, fell silent, signing a non-aggression pact and offering deep space resupply rights. The Zarathi Syndicate, infamous for once debating whether to enslave pre-FTL Earth generations ago, issued a rare 10-system broadcast. We regret past intentions. We celebrate Terran sovereignty. We offer reparations. And most notably, they deleted all records of Earth's classification as harmless. Because no one saw Earth as harmless now. They were something else, something unspoken. Something that made stars feel smaller and military budgets feel insufficient. They were the line, the one no one wanted to cross. Even empires that had survived for millennia began revising their doctrines. New protocols were created. Avoid Terran proximity. Respond to Terran comms with deference. Assume their fleet is always listening. They weren't rules, they were instincts. And from this new fear, the Terran Accord was born. It wasn't a formal government. It had no capital, no military base, no anthem. It wasn't even ratified by Earth's leadership in a traditional sense. It was an idea, a doctrine, a philosophy of consequence. And it came with terms: no slavery in any form, no exploitation of pre-FTL or recovering worlds, no preemptive military strikes on any civilization that has not first struck. Violating these tenets would not be met with sanctions. There would be no trials, no debates, no votes in a chamber. Only the whisper of orbital silence and then obliteration. The message was clear. You do not get to commit atrocities and hide behind treaties. And everyone listened. The Galactic Union, long mocked as a ceremonial relic, immediately ceded multiple enforcement powers to the Terran Accord. Trade hubs once controlled by mercantile guilds now factored Terran traffic into every shipping lane as a primary priority. Diplomatic channels began each interspecies meeting with a simple acknowledgement. We recognize the Terran Accord and its reach. No one wanted to be the next Valnari. Not because Earth was cruel, not because they were erratic, but because they had purpose. Their vengeance hadn't been indiscriminate. It had been surgical. Civilian areas were warned. Evacuation codes were sent. Only those who stood beside tyranny were left to burn. Even Earth's enemies couldn't deny it. They weren't butchers. They were executioners, and they knew exactly where to aim. In a private conclave far from the galactic eye, Admiral Cirque, exiled and disgraced, stared into a holomap, still flickering with red across half his former territory. One of his junior aides' voice, barely above a whisper, asked, "Do you think they'll stop now?" Cirque didn't answer at first. He traced his claw across the edge of the projection, stopping over the ruin that used to be Jarth. His voice, when it came, was hollow. "They will, until someone gives them a reason not to, and then they won't stop at all." Because that's what the galaxy had failed to understand for so long. Earth didn't rise for conquest. They rose to remember their dead, to remember their pain, to etch it into steel and fling it across the stars as both warning and promise. And if anyone dared challenge that memory again, well, the galaxy already knew the answer. Because Earth hadn't just won a war, they'd rewritten the rules. Ghosts of Earth. While the galaxy trembled under Earth's silence, a very different conversation unfolded in the shadows of power. Not everyone bowed. In the lawless reaches of the Lydian Shroud, where cartels ruled rusting megastations and profit was God, the Shiv Syndicate laughed. They saw Earth's assault on the Valnari not as dominance, but as indulgence, emotional and efficient. "Rage is not strategy," hissed Overseer Vesh. The Shiv's cold-blooded leader, the humans spent their fury. Now they're empty. His underlings nodded, not in agreement, but in survival. They believed Earth was still primitive. At heart, brutal, yes, but reactionary, and hammers they reasoned could be baited. Their plan was simple. They wouldn't strike Earth directly. That would be suicide. Instead, they chose Collar 7, a remote colonial trade station on the edge of Terran space, co-managed by humans and minor species. Small, isolated, vulnerable. And most importantly, populated with Terran diaspora, descendants of Earth farmers, engineers, teachers, bloodlines. Without warning, Shiv Raiders sterilized the orbital grid, turned food reserves into slag, then landed. They unleashed poison gas, set fire to the Earth flag, and carved 3 words into the soil with plasma torches. "Come find us." And Earth did, but not with a fleet. They sent one ship, no markings, no flag, no lights. A black silhouette no larger than a cruiser that slipped into the Lydian Shroud without announcement. Within minutes of its arrival, Shiv listening posts went dark, then command towers, then whole stations. At first, Vesh laughed, until the black boxes surfaced, recordings brief, incomplete, captured only shadows melting through bulkheads like smoke. No explosions, no firefights, just silence. Then screams, then nothing. A name whispered across the dark markets followed soon after. Project Revenant. No one had official confirmation. No footage, no survivors. But patterns emerged, stations hundreds of light years apart, going silent within minutes of each other. The Syndicate panicked. Vesh ordered a full retreat from Kalara and the Outer Arms. He burned data archives. He triple-shielded his command corps. He screamed at his advisors to prepare for retaliation. But the retaliation had already begun, not through war, through exposure. Across every Shiv-linked terminal, encrypted feeds were hijacked. Files began broadcasting without permission. Deals, slave manifests, weapons shipments, executions. Every secret the Syndicate ever buried was unearthed and made public. It wasn't vengeance, it was humiliation. And then came the final message delivered to every Shiv commander, every broker, every mercenary under Vesh's command. No video this time, just a voice, calm, low female. "You asked us to come," said Captain Maravos. "You burned our blood. You etched your threat into our soil." A pause, "Now we mark you." The black ship didn't fire a single shot. It didn't need to. Within 48 hours, the Shiv Syndicate collapsed. Their alliances crumbled. Clients turned on them. Stations fell without force, abandoned and looted by their own. And yet the ship remained, hovering, watching. Vesh in his last hours stood aboard the bridge of his final bastion, watching his empire bleed out on the screens around him. His last words transmitted before the feed cut forever weren't angry. They were hollow. They didn't kill us, he said. They unmade us. Back on Earth, in a dim command room beneath the Atlantic Arcology, Mara Voss stood surrounded by silence. Her officers waited for orders for a speech for something, but she said nothing. She simply looked out at the galaxy now reshaped by Earth's wrath and its memory. Earth no longer needed fleets to fight wars. They only needed a reason. And that terrified more species than any bombardment ever could, because the galaxy had realized a horrifying truth. Earth did not move unless it was provoked. But once provoked, Earth would never stop until the stars themselves remembered the pain. Earth turns on itself. Earth had reshaped the stars, but in doing so, it had reshaped itself. The Terran Accord, born from fire and memory, now sat at the center of galactic order. Trade routes bent around its influence. Treaties cited its tenets. Ambassadors rehearsed every syllable before uttering the word Terran in formal settings. But within Earth's own corridors of power, something darker was beginning to grow. The war had made heroes, but it had also made zealots. No one represented this better than General Elias Drex. Once a war hero celebrated for commanding the orbital pincer that shattered the Valnari's Third Fleet, Drex had grown restless. He didn't believe fear was enough. Not anymore. Respect fades, he told a closed circle of officers at the Pacific Bastion, Earth's military crown jewel in low orbit. We must take control of the narrative before someone else does. And so he proposed the Helios Directive, a preemptive strike protocol that authorized silent elimination of emerging threats regardless of diplomatic status. No warnings, no diplomacy, no oversight. They feared us after Jarth, he said. Let's make sure they never stop. Some clapped, others stayed quiet. But no one stopped him, because Drex wasn't wrong about one thing. Fear had stabilized the stars. The galaxy was quiet now. Predictable, manageable. And to Drex, that was worth any cost. Except to Captain Mara Voss. She hadn't been invited to the meeting, but she heard about it within the hour. And she was furious. This isn't what we fought for, she snapped, slamming a classified report onto the table in front of the New Earth Council. We struck back because they murdered our people, not because we wanted to rule from the shadows. But the Council no longer looked at her like a savior. They looked at her like a problem. Too idealistic, too emotional. A relic from a war they had already weaponized. And then came the report from Centauri Space. A neutral listening station had gone dark overnight. No distress signal, no debris, just gone. Official Terran channels denied involvement. But Mara knew better. That night, in a sealed sub-level beneath the Atlantic Arcology, she met with Dr. Lena Merrick, the engineer who had helped design the stealth neural interface used in Project Revenant. I need to know everything, Mara said, her voice low. Helios Revenant. All of it. Lena hesitated. Her eyes were tired, haunted. You really want to open that box? If we don't stop it now, Mara said, then we're not Earth anymore. We're just another empire waiting to fall. Lena exhaled, then slid a data shard across the table. You'll need more than intel, she said. You'll need proof and allies, because once you go against Drex... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Earth had become the monster it once rose to destroy, and now someone had to drag it back. The next day, everything changed. A corrupted signal intercepted by a Centauri freighter was leaked onto public galactic channels. It was grainy, glitched, never meant to be seen. But the words were unmistakable. Target confirmed, initiate Helioid protocol, wipe all organic presence, full deniability authorized. The station it referenced a Centauri diplomatic outpost, neutral, non-military, peaceful. And Earth had erased it. Within hours, the Terran Accord trembled. Alliances cracked, ambassadors were recalled. Trade routes rerouted, old fears reignited. The galaxy watched Earth not with reverence now, but suspicion, and at the center of it all stood General Elias Drex unmasked. In the name of stability, he had approved silent strikes, black site prisons, and the ghosting of entire installations, some of which had never even posed a threat. His dream was simple, a galaxy where Earth didn't just command fear, it controlled reality. Fear maintains peace better than treaties, Drex said to his officers in the Bastion. We are not conquerors, we are keepers. Guardians, executioners of balance. But even as he spoke, the screens behind him began to flicker. One by one they changed, displaying helmet footage, audio logs, reports, screams. The Centauri station, civilians, children laughter, then silence, then fire. And then her voice. I was Earth's sword, once said Mara Voss, her voice echoing through every comm in the room. I am now its mirror. The Bastion's doors burst open. Mara stepped through, not with weapons, but with witnesses. Former Revenant pilots, survivors of the black site prisons, scientists, Centauri diplomats, and behind them live feeds streamed across Earth. You killed for paranoia, she said, standing before Drex. You turned defense into domination. Drex stepped, down eyes sharp. You're playing martyr, Mara. Without me, the galaxy eats us alive. No, she said quietly, with you, we become the very thing that once tried to devour us. For a long second, the room held its breath. Then came the sound of slow clapping. Admiral Roar, Drex's old ally, stood. You said we were the only ones who understood the cost of war, he said. But you forgot the cost of peace. He drew a sidearm and without another word aimed at Drex. A single shot, no spectacle, just judgment, and the bastion went dark.